So whenever you share something with other product managers, you have to attach more context about what is our actual product, what is the market, what is the user. It's just you have the luxury of sharing details in an internal fashion, as privacy is not an issue.
Overall, I think it does not really make sense when you're still in the phase of the founder handing over to the first product person being in charge, because that is a very, very, very difficult shift to make for the founder, and they really need to let go and trust so much. You need to be very conscious about how you manage your time and which of all the loose connections around the role you still prioritize and which just you have to let go, even if you would like to be part of it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS Unbound. I'm this time your host, Daniel Thulfaut, Head of Product at Central SaaS Group. And with me today is Arne Kittler, and we're going to have a fully packed episode today and going to talk about the value of product communities, how to build product communities, and also the struggles we are facing with that from different perspectives. And we will also touch the slightly new topic of fractional leadership, fractional CPO roles, and how we see the future of that evolving. Arne, pleasure to have you here. Would you be so kind to introduce yourself?
Of course, I'm happy to. And thanks for having me here, Daniel. I've been following SaaS Group for quite some time, and I think it's really impressive to see how the group has evolved. I saw you recently reached the 100 million ARR, if I'm not mistaken.
We did.
So kudos for achieving that. Yeah, and I'm pleased to be in this podcast. I've been building digital products and services for over 25 years. And for a long time, I was employed in organizations as a product leader. So I was for a long time working as a VP of product at Xing. And I was also in the SaaS business as a CPO at Facelift for some time. And for the last 1.5 years, I've chosen for something I think that the British call a portfolio career. So a mix of different things that I do. So I'm a co-founder of Hey Clarity, which is a group of seasoned product leadership coaches that helps scale-ups and corporates build product organizations that really work. I'm also a co-founder of Product at Heart, one of the leading product conferences in Europe. And I also do some individual interim product leadership roles as well as product leadership coaching. And when you suggested, Daniel, that we speak about product communities, that definitely is a topic that speaks to me and that I'm happy to have a conversation with you about, because I've been fascinated by the power of communities for a very, very, very long time already. Like before I got into product, like already during my studies in the 90s, I was fascinated by virtual communities, as it was called then. So I researched about these email groups where you subscribe to an email server and you're part of a global group of people who care about the same niche topic as you. And then over the years, I was involved in several other communities. So I was early to join the Hamburg UX Roundtable as a kind of bar group of people getting together, chatting about UX matters. And then I think in particular in my time at Xing, I also got to learn about internal product communities. So I was one of the founding members of Xing's internal product community, which at some point grew up to 100 product people. And I think a lot of what we'll be talking about will probably be from the learnings that I made them. But I've always also been involved in external communities. So I co-founded Product Tank Hamburg together with 2 friends. And I mentioned Product at Heart already, which is a conference and also a community of sorts. So different aspects of how you could look at communities. And so I'm curious what we'll learn, because I know that you also have some community activities going on in your role across the SaaS group. So I'm also curious to hear how you have been handling things so far.
Amazing. Yeah, great intro into our topic. And to put this into perspective, also why this appears on the SaaS Group podcast. So when I joined SaaS Group as a central product leader, we essentially were 6 or 7 acquisitions by then, where I got the chance to do a lot of one-on-one mentoring with the product leadership on the brand side. And as we were growing and now 25 plus companies, that doesn't scale very well. But I realized a couple of years back that we now have so many great product people inside these brands, And my job shifts from mentoring to connecting these people and surfacing the learnings that they made. So I became by accident or by scale, a bit of a community manager. And well, some things worked and something we're still struggling with. So I'm also super curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
But it's a great distinction to start with, that there are different kinds of communities. You have these online communities where you join a Slack or a newsletter, like Lenny's, I think, is in the PM world kind of the most known one. Then you have offline communities and events, and you have the internal ones, which I think are often a bit neglected or grow organically, but often lack the funding and the expertise to help them grow.
Yeah.
So if we start with the internal ones versus the external kind of communities, where do you see the benefit of actually having an internal community if there are so many sources available outside of that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, as you say, like there are at least two different types of communities. One are the bigger public community of sorts, and the other one are the internal communities, which I usually refer to as communities of practice also. And I find them particularly beneficial because they're usually more stable. You have more of a shared context for the people, and they are also typically more results oriented towards shared goals. Whereas the bigger open communities like Product Tank, for instance, I think they are more about the weaker ties, maybe the bigger network, but to benefit from it, it's well, you cannot plan for the benefits as much. You can also not steer it as much. It's more about serendipity and, being curious about what's happening. So, and I personally think that internal communities of practice are super valuable as an organization grows to, learn from each other, build a shared understanding of how you want to do things, establish standards, drive product culture, and also in the different product roles also get orientation for your own personal development, because you see some of the people that you may not always see in your day-to-day because they're not part of your cross-functional team, or maybe not even part of your sub-organization, but in kind of interacting with them, you also get a sense for, okay, what are areas that I want to improve? What are areas for me to grow? And what are maybe areas where I'm already pretty strong and others can learn from me and I should be sharing? So I think it's a great opportunity for companies to do that.
Absolutely. Great point. And also, before jumping into your experience at Xing and how you actually, build that up and what kind of tangible things are involved in being part of a community of practice, I can say from our perspective, one of the added benefits is context.
Yeah.
And right, so whenever you're in an external community or internal environment, you always struggle with how much detail can I share, and also am I allowed to share? There's the data privacy issue, there's security issue, which all goes away once you do this internally, and you can show real numbers, you can ask the questions you're actually interested in. It doesn't need to stay on the surface level anymore.
Yeah. And also, I mean, another aspect of context is also that, for instance, the tooling is the same. So one thing that, for instance, we found out as we did the community of practice at Xing was that instead of bringing in external people to tell us about, I don't know, tracking at that point or metrics and working with metrics, and then most of the trainers that would come in would tell us how to do it all with Google Analytics, but we didn't use Google Analytics. We were using some Adobe stuff back at the time. So it was much more valuable for us to have one of the people in the product community who was strong in working with data to share how to do that in our context with the tools that we have. So I think that's also one aspect where internal communities of practice are more relevant than by default more generic trainings that you find out there, or as you say, like the stuff that can be shared with the outside world when you're there. So yeah, it's a very powerful thing to have.
Absolutely. It's kind of by definition, it's applicable to that specific scenario. You never have to do this long transfer of the thought, like how could I apply this at our company? Because, well, it actually has been applied at your company.
Exactly. So that makes it easier to apply it.
All right. So that we get this a little more tangible. How can we how can we visualize a community of practice at Xing? What are the kind of rituals or kind of habits built in? Perhaps you could walk us a bit through at least the scenery when you think of the best time at Xing where product communities already worked. And we're going to talk about how to kick them off a little later.
Yeah. I mean, just for transparency, I mean, what I'm talking about is a phase maybe 10 years ago. So I no longer work for Xing, and I don't know if these days they still have a product community like this. But back then when we did it, we started with a small core group of people that wanted to do this. And the general trigger to do it was that we understood that we had grown as an organization and we no longer met every day. Just, all the different product people basically were spread across different business units of the organizations, and there was no natural gathering. We were also in different parts of the building, in different cities, and so on. And we noticed that we didn't have that natural exchange anymore that we had when we were a smaller organization. So we said, okay, we must make sure that we stay connected and that we can still learn from each other. And when we set it up, there was a small group of people who initiated it. And we, over time, got into a steady rhythm of monthly meetings where we had certain routines to go through. And we also took time to have, I think back then, something like 4 dedicated community days in a year where we all got together, not only in a meeting, but like for a full day event, usually dedicated to some specific topic of learning, but always also making sure that the interpersonal connections were happening. And this organizing group that we have over time identified, okay, what are the needs from the community? What are topics that we want to work on? And then some of them were worked on with everybody in the room. Some were worked on in subgroups. So for instance, this alignment framework, Auftragsklärung, that we developed back then, that's also one of the result of this internal community of practice that we developed.
So besides people sharing their struggles and their learnings, there were also real artifacts that were produced by that, and these was funneled back into the processes and the kind of tools that you use.
Yeah, that was the case. So basically we identified where we lacked something, and then we worked on it and shared it back with the community. And another aspect is that we also worked on the values that we as a product community within Xing wanted to have, what we wanted to stand for, also in order to attract the right type of people from the outside. And one thing that I quite liked is that once we had defined those values, we always started to reinforce them in the regular meetings that we have. For instance, you could nominate other colleagues and give them a kudo if they did something that expressed our values particularly well. And I thought that was quite a strong mechanism also, for instance, to make it tangible for new joiners what we consider as good product practice, what is, how do we want to interact with each other in the product community. So that was much more powerful than putting a poster on the wall with the values. Like I think we also at some point had values on the wall, but I strongly believe that this reflecting about it and giving people kudos for real life actions is much more powerful in order to emphasize the values that you want to have.
I like that. And it might even create a bit of an incentive for internal visibility for
Yes.
someone to be part of that conversation and to actually openly share and get those kudos.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that is overall also one aspect that was important, was that we did not only have the visibility within our not our growing group of product people, but that we also had the visibility of the board. So there was a clear backing of the board, and we always had board members participate in the get together. So they also saw who was getting those kudos for good value enforcing behavior and so on. So I think that also lent the whole thing the necessary importance that allowed people to take time out of their busy days and really show up, because if a board member is showing up to be part of it, then it's also probably okay for you as a product manager to, take the time to participate in such an event. So that was a very strong signaling effect.
That's an amazing idea. And it might be an answer to one of our biggest struggles. So what works really well for us are these community days. So we also do, we call it the product camp, where once a year we fly everyone to a location for 3 days. And last year you were there as a keynote speaker in Berlin, and this year we were in Budapest. As these days are dedicated to that, it's already pulled out of the calendars of the people, and they value this networking, and they actually find the time to do that. Where in day-to-day or even in monthly meetings, there's always this barrier of, okay, now I need to carve out some time from my busy day to do that. Yeah. And we're struggling with making that effort worthwhile, I would say. Yeah. Or I think the effort is always worthwhile if you do it, but I fully understand, and that might be special to our situation, as we're part of the same group, but we're not operating in the exact same company. So whenever you share something with other product managers, you have to attach more context about what is our actual product, what is the market, what is the user. It's just, you have the luxury of sharing details in an internal fashion, as privacy is not an issue, but you're still lacking the context similar to an external round. So this is where we're struggling the most, and perhaps getting more board attention or more like leadership buy-in into this and more visibility might make it easier for participants to join. Yeah.
I would think, at least that is my experience. And I can imagine, in this specific setup that you have, being part of the same group, but at the same time being part of different organizations and working on different products, and quite a variety of products, actually, in your case. I think continuity matters a lot. Like, I was also at some point during my Xing time, I also organized the mobile product managers community across the whole Burda group, because Xing was owned by Burda, or is owned by Burda. And there I could really tell, like, we tried to do this only as, by getting together once or twice a year and some calls in between. And somehow we never really managed to get momentum into the whole thing, because it was always different people showing up or people not showing up, and where we lacked the necessary context, as you said, because some worked in publishing, some built a social network like us, and I think we would have benefited from aspects that reinforced that people really showed up also to in between calls, and that way, building a more continuous group of people interacting and building their relationships over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it also touches upon, when you scale that, it's not only about continuity, but also about how large will that group get, and is it still feasible to have that kind of discussion? Yeah. Did you at some point break it down into smaller circles by, I don't know, by topic, by unit, by randomly assigning people? How did you cope with having, in the end, 40 people in a meeting for sharing for everyone? Are there some learnings?
I think it's less a matter of the group size, as long as you still find a common themes that are relevant. I think the like in this Burda mobile community that we have, I think the problem was more that some of us spent most of their attention on topics that were not at all relevant to some of the other people. And like in that particular case, we didn't deal with it as consciously as we maybe should have, because it was also more of a side thing to us, and there was not the board attention and so on. So like we didn't really resolve that. But looking back, I think probably would have been good to create subgroups and not go, even if it's more logistical effort than to coordinate several meetings, but like I think having enough of a shared interest in the stuff you talk about, I think is mandatory for any community to work. Not only communities of practice, actually for all other communities as well. So I think there can be a certain level of diversity which is fruitful and which triggers new thoughts and gives you new perspective. But if like people talk about some completely different way of monetizing, for instance, than the type of business you're in, then I mean, you can find it interesting maybe as a hobbyist or with the ambition to grow as a as a product person at large, but like it's still much more difficult to stay connected and stay engaged with that. So yes, I think if you notice that it gets too big or too diverse in topics, then probably splitting up would be a good idea.
Yeah. And if we talk about management of that or organizing that, and you might also be, drawing from your experience in organizing other sorts of communities outside of the internal company. I think when you said when you started, it was a bit of a grassroots movement as peers, you wanted to share more. But at some point, it became likely a relevant part of someone's work to keep that going and to organize it and to spread the word. When was the point when that happened, and did it end up to be like an actual full-time position doing that in a certain size of the community, or was it always just someone being very passionate about it and as a pet project on their side?
In our case, it never was somebody's dedicated role. I mean, I think there was some understanding that certain people were organizing it and were putting time in, but no, there was never a dedicated role. I think some other product organizations these days have dedicated roles for this, sometimes also coming out of the product operations context. In our case, it stayed more of an, I don't know how to say that, enthusiastic hosts thing that drove the whole thing forward. And that is also, I mean, you asked like what matters to get such a community up from the ground. I think it's two things. Like one is you need hosts that also feel responsible for hosting, that feel responsible for making sure that the participants of that community, feel welcome and that there is some thought put into how they get together, making sure that there are breaks for people to to go to the bathroom, making sure that there are drinks, like it has these very operational things, but it also is an attitudinal thing. Like if you're a host, this is also something like at a good party. If you're the host, you cannot at some point say, oh no, come on, now I have my fifth beer and I'm just one of the guests. No, you're not. Like you always, as a host, you're a host, and it needs some people who feel this responsibility and who are willing to take this responsibility. And the other thing is curation. That is I think like applies both for external conferences or communities as well as for internal like carefully selecting, okay, what are the topics that are relevant to people, how to combine them, how to set up a day. Like if you have such an event as the one that you just mentioned that you do, that I also was lucky to take part in. I think the part of curation that you put in, that's exactly the kind of thing that is needed and that distinguishes, a healthy community from just inviting people to show up to some place, and then over time people will lose interest and the whole thing will lose momentum.
Yeah, I fully agree. Although I have to admit that I was a bit shocked about that. I completely misestimated the effort involved in actually pulling that up and where that effort actually goes. Mm-hmm. I thought it would be 80% on curating the content and 20% on the organizational stuff. And it turned out that I was 80% doing email ping pong with the hotel on room reservations and selecting menus for dinner reservations. Yeah. So I wouldn't say I'm passionate about that, but it is part of that job, and it has to be done.
And I think especially if you're establishing something new, I consider it, I mentioned earlier that I organized this conference, Proc at Heart, together with my friend Petra. And these days, to be honest, we also have an event manager who's helping us to do the hotel bookings and coordinates all the suppliers. But for the first 5-6 years, we did all of that ourselves. And I always also considered it part of the curation, even though when you're on the line with a hotel, it's really not funny. But there are also so many decisions you have to make and how you want to deal with that. Do you offer breakfast or not? Where do you want the speakers to gather after they come to the hotel from the speakers' dinner? All of these little things. And since there is no perfect way of doing this, it has to be your way of doing it. And finding out what your way of doing that is means you need to be involved with that. So I'd rather, do some of these tedious tasks, and by doing so, find out what works and how I like the total experience to be, rather than saying, okay, I'm just, picking the speakers and hand the rest off to an event agency and they take care of the rest. I mean, a lot of people do that, but I think these are kind of soulless events, and you can very easily feel it, that it's not the same thing as if people, who feel like hosts of the community take care also of these unsexy parts.
Yeah. I love that framing. That will make my day a little better next year when I when I do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So getting back to the actual formats of these community sessions. So we've explored different ways to do that. I mean, the obvious one is people come together and someone has a learning and shares it. But then people can also bring in their challenges and have others chime in. They might bring in a work in progress artifact that they want feedback on, or even co-create something in kind of a hackathon fashion. Did you have any experience with, did you try all of these formats? Anything that worked especially well, something that you struggled with, or where the return on invest was questionable?
Yeah, I think we tried all of these formats for different topics and for different reasons. So I mean, I quite enjoyed when we did have some co-creation sessions and also were able to benefit from the perspective of other colleagues in different parts of the business that still looked at our problems or like somebody's specific problems and were able to help them. I think it also helped to build a shared understanding, because a bit differently from the setup at SaaS Group. I mean, in the end, most of us were still responsible for something that the outside world considered one product, even if we were split into different business units. So for instance, like at that time, part of that time, I was responsible for the mobile apps of Xing. And there were actually quite some politics going on into, which areas of the product get represented in the main navigation of the mobile app and stuff like that. And by having co-creation sessions, I think that helped also to build understanding of those things. But I can imagine that similar things can also be done in a multi-company setup as SaaS Group. Something else that I think also helped to keep momentum in the community was also that we combined learning from each other. So like having people who were knowledgeable about certain things internally to share, but also combining that with external impulses. And, sometimes these were bigger names, like, I don't know, we had Teresa Torres for a video call or so. And this is also one way of signaling importance to the whole thing. And for that call, we even had the CEO join and listen to what Teresa Torres had to say. And, some of the points she made also helped us to reinforce some of our thoughts and ideas towards our own CEO. But she just heard it from a knowledgeable and incredible outside voice. And so this was also an important trigger for internal discussions that we have. So this is definitely also something that I recommend doing. But overall, I think, something that you are also doing is also, I think it's also important to bring people together in the same room, especially nowadays, with us being online all of the time and a lot of information being shared or being, generated through AI. I think it is even more important than before to also use these gatherings to let people meet face to face and have real life interactions in the same room.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think for us, what we realize is that it's through, you mentioned AI now, it actually pushes us towards more co-creation, because a lot of the typical challenges our product people are facing, for a lot of them, I would say you don't need an internal community of experts for that. It is actually a feasible way to just ask ChatGPT of an answer there, and likely it will give you a similar response, perhaps even more nuanced than what you would get from someone internally. So you have to be more deliberate about the topics that you choose for actually pushing into that internal community. Yeah. But the co-creation part works really well. So for example, in Budapest at our last product camp, we had multiple days, and the first were a bit of getting into this, some external speakers, just piling on input for them to then, go through in the upcoming days. But on the last day, we did small tables with like an N8N themed hackathon,
Mm-hmm.
where every team should build something that is actually applicable right after this product camp.
Yeah.
So we got out of that with 5 working prototypes for
Wow.
a new product process that can actually be applied to 25 companies now.
Yeah.
And when we did a postmortem on that event, everyone was mentioning, well, we of course we gotta get together, we got a lot of networking, but that session and actually sharing this on a live subject, on an experiment we developed together, that's where the magic happens. And that was different than, I would say, 2 years before, when that was not feasible in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine that worked very well. And I think that's also where the difference between, knowledge, I think these days, or facts, well, supposed facts can be, you can get them elsewhere. You don't really need to get together, but like real learning, I think is really benefits from also, doing something together and from shared experiences. And so I can very well imagine that this hackathon was a great approach.
Something that's a bit, well, I'm not actually sure if it's that special for SaaS Group, but I've been running now the central product team for a couple of years, which is a bit of a platform building team, like product operations to a certain degree, but also acting like in-house consultants. And these kind of events always help us see where do our companies actually struggle with, and how can we multiply ourselves? What is worth building as a template, as a base process, as a blueprint, and how can we maximize that we're not working in a one-on-one fashion, but we create something for one brand and then can bring it to 20 brands if they're interested.
Yeah.
So for that, the community is invaluable for us.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's a good way to feel the pulse of the community, probably in a different way than if you just send out a survey or so. But it's has a different quality to it. I'd like to think.
Yes, and I would say the central team members are also explicitly tasked with that, with sharing that knowledge between their initiatives, their kind of missions at the companies. And I think this is a good segue to our second topic of today, if we talk about fractional resources. So while most of the time I wouldn't call it fractional leadership, and we also don't, well, I did some interim CPO function at some of our brands, but overall we lend out to our companies fractional resource and product design and product growth management that are like an extended workbench. Now they are as much as possible integrated into their team, but they do this for 2 to 3 teams at the same time. And with some additional capacity reserved for then transforming those learnings and those new things to scale that inside the whole portfolio. And that worked really well for us. So it's this very centralized, driven community aspect of not only bringing people together, but deploying ourselves into different companies and then spreading that knowledge actively. We do an internal newsletter, we share this through internal webinars and stuff like that. And that is one of the things that worked better. And I think it's part of a fractional resource topic. And I was saying this is a bit of a segue into a second topic, because I know that you've been freelancing now for some time and helping other companies with the experience that you've built over the last decades. And you could call that fractional leadership or fractional CPO role as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's I see a lot of other freelancers refer to it that way on LinkedIn in particular. And I must say, I don't quite like the term fractional for product leaders so much, because I think it's terminology wise, it's coming from the perspective of the freelancers. So it emphasizes the fact that you only do it part-time, aka you have time to do other stuff. Or, I mean, some people even like to think they can do several fractional leadership roles at once, which I have doubts about. But anyways, so I think, like, I wouldn't usually refer to myself as a fractional product leader. I would say, like, right now I'm, for instance, doing an interim role with a SaaS company in the e-mobility space, and this role happens to be a part-time role because of my availability and because of their budget. But I think if these constraints weren't there, I think they would probably prefer to have me in the house full time, or well, at least near full time. So like emphasizing this fractional as you do with this term, I think is the wrong perspective. But nevertheless, I clearly see value in this role, both for myself as a person who does it, but also for the organizations that I'm doing it with.
All right. Yeah. I mean, we can call it a different way. I've never thought about fractional that way, but I fully agree. It emphasizes the wrong part of that interaction.
Yeah. I think it's a different. I'm not sure if that is just because I'm looking at it from a leadership perspective, but I mean, I have seen fractional IC roles work quite well. Also, like inside larger organizations, for instance, when we were, for instance, like that's again a long time ago, but when we were driving the mobile change at Xing, like coming from one central mobile team to making mobile the new normal at every team, we also consciously embedded people from the former central team into all the different teams to work with them in a similar way that you've just described, to help them have success moments very quickly, to introduce them to the necessary processes, to the necessary toolings and so on, and bring the learnings about the difficulties they had back to the central team that I was leading, to also help us, identify where we needed new standards, where we needed to establish new ways of support. So in the IC role, I've seen it work quite well. Back then, we also didn't call it fractional, but I think in that case, the fact that you split your attention between different things probably is more mutually part of what's beneficial to everybody involved.
Yeah, but it's also at the same time a real struggle. So this context switching and having multiple hats was a real challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And we always took it very pragmatically. So I would say, for example, our product designer roles, I would say even the smallest team, the smallest SaaS company actually deserves, if they have a customer facing UI, they deserve an actual product design person to push that forward. But a lot of our smaller companies inside the group didn't have the luxury of even the budget of having that as a full-time role.
Yeah.
So between having no designer at all and not being able to afford a full designer, I think having 25% of a designer or 50% of a designer is a great value.
Yeah.
So this is kind of where this was born. And we always thought, or still think, whenever we did our job great as a fractional resource, people stop working with us because they see the value in what we're doing and hire a full-time person after that. So us getting fired is the best way possible that we can do.
Yeah.
But it brings the question, when is a company actually ready to do part-time leadership in product? So what would you say is the perfect time to get in touch with you, and at what stage, or what prerequisites need to be in place for this to actually work?
Yeah. I mean, I have the impression that for bringing in a part-time product leader, I mean, maybe to say that, first of all, I don't think that these part-time setups are a good arrangement for much longer than a year. I mean, I know that in theory, also when you read about fractional, there are also people who say they do it for 3 or 4 years and they do it with several companies at once. I'm not sure. Maybe that works for them. Like in the context that I've been in, I think there's only so much time where this setup works. And I think, coming back to your question of like what does need to be in place for it to make sense overall, I think it does not really make sense when you're still in the phase of the founder handing over to the first product person being in charge, because I mean, that is a very, very, very difficult shift to make for the founder, and they really need to let go and trust so much. And I feel that a part-time person will never be able to live up to those expectations. So if there's, I mean, I've also been in this situation of being handed over a product from the founder, and it's quite some pressure. And I'm not sure if this is something that can be done well in a part-time arrangement. So I think if that's the situation of a company, I'd rather go with somebody less senior than the fractional person you would bring in, but have somebody who really has the bandwidth to also go into all of the details that the founder, after years of experience, is in and is still interested in, because like a part-time leader like myself will never be able to cover the same depth of details. So this means that I think it's a better setup in a slightly scaled way, where you already have other product people in the organizations that the part-time product leader can also delegate to and can also rely on. Like in the current setup, for instance, where I am, I'm doing this as a 1 year maternity leave cover for the head of product, and she was working full time, so I will never be able to fully replace what she's doing. But thankfully, I have a strong team of product team leaders, for product owners, for product managers, for design, and so on, that I can rely on. And the way I handle it is that I delegate more responsibility to them and let them handle a lot of the detail work, while I'll try to sort of the ways of working, as well as the overarching directional things that I try to clarify as being part of the management group, for instance. So, but I need enough of an organization that can cover the gaps that I will necessarily leave as a part-time product leader.
Oh, that's super interesting. And I mean, you said you see this as a 1 year thing, and in this time. In this case, I guess it's contractually, but also in terms of making sense, being a part-time product leader for a year, there's a bit of a compromise involved in what you can get done. But I could imagine this also upskilling and up-leveling parts of the organization and figuring out where can we actually cut corners and where can we delegate more efficiently. So, after the maternity leave, that person might come back into a actually well-oiled machine, or where now that half of a job that was left open kind of can now be used more impactful.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
I mean, that is at least my ambition. Let's see. I mean, I still have more than half a year to go, so let's see what she says when she comes back. But yeah, I mean I think that is also one of the chance of having an interim, or also particularly an experienced interim product leader. I will definitely bring in some things that the organically grown product leaders in the company can't bring, because I've seen more of the outside perspective. I'm continuously also seeing different organizations through my coaching work, and I hope that this reflects also in helping the product organization mature while I'm there.
So I stopped looking for the past couple of months, but like looking back into the last 2 years, there were so many discussions on LinkedIn, on Reddit, in different product communities, that PMs were actually complaining about they already have like 150% job, and every second person was suffering from burnout, basically. So it really painted a picture of this 14-hour day PM working to the bones. And now we're talking about leadership and making that a part-time role for a year. I think the practical question is, what usually gets left behind? Like, what is the stuff that you perhaps even deprioritize or not do it all in that case?
Yeah, I mean, you're pointing to the biggest challenge of such roles, obviously, because I mean, when I was still, an employed full-time product leader, I also clearly worked more than 40 hours a week. And so some of the techniques that I learned in such a setup just don't apply for the new role. So for instance, like I'm usually somebody who goes in and if in doubt, I will have another extra conversation with the head of sales to make sure we're really on the same page, and creates alignment and so on. And I just don't have the time to do that. And that is tricky. And sometimes I'm also not 100% happy with the limited time that I have. But I think that's just a reality of it. And I think it's important that everybody in the organization understands that you are consciously making choices of what you're doing and which meetings you're taking part in. So for instance, like at the organization that I'm doing the interim role right now, there's also some get-togethers of the head-offs that are more casually, and as much as I would like to be part of those rounds, I've chosen not to make time for this and really focus on the work with the team and focus on like the real, the more obvious alignment rounds when we talk about strategy and those things, because I can better plan to have impact when I join those things. Whereas with the others, there is some serendipity to it, and it may be super valuable, and I might learn something that is also beneficial for my role or for my team. But it might as well just be a nice coffee chat, and that's something that has to go. For instance, in this case, I think the other thing that I'm consciously deprioritizing is some of the detail. So I have to trust more. Just as I said, like I'm luckily have strong team leads, and I rely on them to be really in depth with the work of their teams. But I cannot look at what each of the teams is doing on a specific level in the same degree that I would probably have done if it was a full-time or more than full-time role.
I could see this also being a great learning journey for yourself.
Totally.
And if I look back, I don't know, 15 years ago, I was happy doing like 15-hour days if the project was the right one, and that felt super energizing. And now with 2 kids, like I don't miss those 15 hours days anymore. So I naturally think about, can I actually do the same kind of impact, but with less hours? So if you would now go back with the learnings that you make right now, would go back 5 years, 10 years, would you do something different? Would you prioritize differently?
I'm not sure that I am. I don't think I'm done making those learnings. Let's say, so. I mean, you're totally right, and this is also part of what I'm hoping to learn. And sometimes I'm also reflecting, like imagining I was in a full-time position, what would I apply? To be fully honest with you, I'm still figuring that out, and sometimes I find it still very, very challenging to make those decisions of how to differently organize my work as a product leader with such a restricted time window. I know it's possible. I mean, also, I've also worked with quite a few, permanent part-time product leaders who prioritized family and just chose to have an 80% role, for instance. I know it's doable, but you need to be very conscious about how you manage your time and which of the all the loose connections around the role you still prioritize, and which just you have to let go, even if you would like to be part of it. But so I think what I'm saying is, I'm afraid I cannot share that learning with you yet. I'm still learning myself.
Well, great situation to be in, a great opportunity to be able to make those learnings.
Yeah.
Same with us. So I think saas Group figured some stuff out and still struggling with other things and constantly reinventing how we do things, and say same on your side. So I would say we actually leave it at that today and come back in a year or so and see what changed, what did we learn, and do we need to update this and have some different impressions.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Okay. So thanks a lot for having me, Daniel.
Thank you for being with us. It was a pleasure.
All the best, and speak to you soon.
Same here. Speak to you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. SaaS Unbound is brought to you by saas Group. We're a long-term home for great B2B SaaS. We buy, keep the team and brand DNA, and help with the boring stuff like hiring and finance, so founders can truly focus on building great products. If you're a founder who'd like to be featured or explore an acquisition, reach out through the form on our website or email me at anna@saas.group.